Hello and welcome to FlexPro. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe. And as always, let us know your comments and feedback on today's video down below. So let's jump into this. In a world that it seems that there's a new diet practically every day, we wanted to kind of give you a list that breaks down the pros and cons of the most popular diets and make it so that you can make an informed decision on what works best for you. So without further ado, let's jump into this.
Paleo diet is based on the dietary habits of our cave-dwelling ancestors. So we're talking wild game, lots of meat, seafood, lots of vegetables, some fruit, seeds, and nuts. So what you won't find on the paleo diet is sort of the foods that have come out of the agricultural or industrial era. So there's no grains, there is no dairy, no legumes, and in short, there is no processed food. So the mantra of paleo, if you will, is keep it clean.
So we're talking hunter-gatherer, forager. That is the focus.
Exactly.
Now let's talk about the health benefits, which is, proponents of paleo really, focus on that.
So proponents of the paleo diet have said that the human body isn't really equipped to handle these foods that came out of the agricultural era. So, a lot of people that have seen great success with the paleo diet are people that have suffered with, digestive issues. We're talking like IBS, gluten intolerance, or even lactose intolerance. People that have cut these foods out of their diet have seen great success. So that's a lot of the reason that paleo has been getting a lot of, buzz and hype in the last couple of years is because, when you cut out those foods, our bodies are really reaping the benefits.
Okay, now another benefit that everyone is interested in is weight loss.
Weight loss.
So how does paleo stack up in that way?
All right, so studies have shown that a diet that is high in protein and low in carbs is the best for you to lose weight. But unlike the bacon craze, low carb, 90s diets that our minds kind of go to, paleo really supports having a varied sources of proteins. So that's something that you can really keep in mind. You're not going to just be eating bacon and meat all the time. You can have lots of other foods that you love.
The keto craze has thousands of people trading in their carbs for a high-fat frenzy, and they say they don't miss the sugar or the bread.
So when you're in ketosis, that means the liver is making ketones. Ketones are a fuel that get put into the bloodstream. So one of the first things you would notice is increased energy. You have this super fuel that your body is creating from fat that's now in your bloodstream. One of the things that people notice is they no longer crave sweets as much.
Would you all like that, by the way?
Which is huge,
So I'm only pointing this out because the people I've talked to, like you, who are successful in keto diets, say it's easy because they're not craving the foods they know they can't have.
Right. So another reason or another way you might detect that you're in ketosis is you might smell it on your breath. A little metallic breath, a little sweet rotten apple breath or something like that.
But it doesn't have to be bad breath.
No.
People think they're going to smell like the worst thing imaginable.
No.
Right.
Exactly. And then a final way is on urine strips. So, you pee purple, right? That's one of the hallmarks of being in ketosis is it's demonstrated by the urine. Yeah.
So come on over. I want you to show everyone what kinds of foods we can and what we can't eat on this program. And again, people aren't shipping this to you in a box. You're going to actually make these decisions yourself. We're treating you like an adult because you should be treated like an adult to make wise decisions. So what is okay to eat? Green checks for keto.
Right. Okay. So protein rich, these are clean proteins. So we got beef, pork, lamb, chicken, turkey.
So these meats have fats, obviously, which is what you're looking for, but you can get your fat without having to produce, you don't have to have a steak to get the fat.
Absolutely not. So then we have nuts and seeds and oil. So we have macadamia nuts, one of my favorites, pecans, Brazil nuts, avocado oil, coconut oil, butter, ghee, full-fat yogurt, for instance, and even some of the, the fringe foods like unsweetened almond milk are okay.
I'm just going to go through a couple of these things. First of all, so there's lots of things you can eat that are actually arguably good for you, but there are things, this is what throws docs off, they're in the don't eat category, they're also good for you, right? I mean, we all know not to have soft drinks, but what's the problem with an apple or a potato, for example?
Yeah, so apples, carrots, those are what we call high glycemic fruits and vegetables. So they convert to glucose pretty quickly in the bloodstream. And what we're trying to do here is we're trying to reduce the amount of glucose that gets into the bloodstream because glucose shuts off ketosis, right? So we want to avoid bread, pasta, cereal, cakes, candies, pies, cookies. I'm sorry, but that goes along with it.
They're going to rush the stage.
No, but look at all the good stuff you can eat, right? So.
Mark, thank you very much.
Intermittent fasting could provide many health benefits beyond weight loss. That's according to an article in the New England Journal of Medicine. Here to break it all down for us, NBC medical contributor, Dr. Natalie Azar. Full disclosure, I did this for about 4 or 5 days.
How'd it go?
Carson sucked me into it. It's not for me, but I think it's partly because of the schedule. But I was surprised to hear that it's beyond weight loss.
Yeah. So this was actually a review of past animal and human studies for multiple years. And what the authors posit as potential benefits, in addition to weight loss, is improving obesity, improving insulin resistance, cholesterol, hypertension, inflammation, also some cognitive parameters, all things that could theoretically improve longevity. How does this work, they say? Well, it's all about this thing called the metabolic switch. So what happens when you fast is that your body burns through all the sugar in the liver. Ultimately, then it has to transition into burning fat for fuel. That actually starts this whole signaling cascade in the body that helps to suppress inflammation. It starts to repair damaged cells and has all these benefits on a cellular level that could contribute to all of these potential health benefits.
Your body also becomes grumpy sometimes as well.
Yes. Good point, Kristen. They do say that it can take a couple of weeks, even months, to sort of, equilibrate when you do something like this. But I should mention that there are, I wouldn't say concerns, but some things to sort of point out for people who are considering doing this, especially in the new year. There aren't really any long-term studies yet on the potential health benefits. We're talking long-term. A lot of the studies that were done on overweight, young and middle-aged adults, so unclear if it's generalizable to everyone. And I think it is important to note that children shouldn't do this, elderly people should not necessarily do this, people who are underweight or have eating disorders, pregnant, breastfeeding women. So there's, if you're going to do something like this, definitely do it with the guidance of a doctor and a nutritionist.
To Craig's point, though, isn't it tough to do this diet if you have a schedule that is complicated?
Well, that's the thing. So there's two main ones that I think are the most popular. One is the 16 and the 8, and one is the 5 and the 2. So the 16 and the 8 is basically that you're fasting for 16 hours and you have an 8-hour window where you're doing your eating. And by the way, you should be eating healthfully.
You can't just go out and go.
Yeah, fast food for 8 hours and then and the other one is the 5 and 2, where you're basically eating normally for 5 days, and then on 2 non-consecutive days you're restricting your calories. So people who are working night shifts or who have difficult may not get to that 10 to 12 hour point where that mechanism, that metabolic change starts to really kick in. You need to have that prolonged period of fasting in there.
You're not dieting from the start, you're saying that, but you are tracking macros really tightly from the start. How much does that factor in? Just that awareness of macros, maybe for somebody who doesn't have that awareness.
Well, it's a lifestyle change for sure, because it's you're conscious of everything at that point. There's no sneaking M&Ms. Well, that doesn't matter. No, that needs to be tracked. Even though it wasn't a dieting study, the group that had the low protein intake, they, in essence, were dieting, because what we realized was they just cut their protein and they didn't do any compensation by increasing carbs and fat. So interestingly, we didn't want them to diet other than to hit their protein, which they did, but they reduced their calories, the low protein group. And in contrast, the high protein group did increase their calories because they had to increase their protein.
Okay, yeah, and the idea of having these macros in mind, eat regardless of what you're eating, is something that you've also studied specifically in the framework of flexible dieting. Tell us about what you've been doing there.
Yeah, so to the best of my knowledge, we did the first study in resistance trained individuals with this flexible dieting paradigm. So
if it fits your macros, as people are
exactly,
Macros, yes.
So my graduate student at the time, Lauren Conlon, designed this study. She was in my lab. And what we did was we had 2 groups of people, males and females. They were all resistance trained. And we randomly assigned half of them to a macros, if it fits your macros group. We randomly assigned the other half to a meal plan group, what we called the rigid dieting group. So they were given, here's what your breakfast should be, with a few exchanges, eggs maybe, or bacon, or just different options for foods. But it was a fairly limited meal plan option list, so rigid foods essentially. And the macro group, we said, or the if it fits your macros group, eat whatever you want, just make sure you hit your macros. And we encouraged them to get a variety of foods, but we didn't track that. Both groups reduced their calories by 25%, and they did that over a 10-week period. So it was a 10-week diet. The other nice thing that we did was, after the 10-week diet, we had a post-diet phase. And what we told him was, after the diet's over, for 10 weeks, don't diet anymore. Just do whatever you want. If you want to track. If you don't. We wanted to see how people would come out of these diets. How would their bodies respond if you were previously tracking or if you were following a rigid diet. So basically, there wasn't any significant differences in weight loss. Both groups lost about 5 pounds over the 10-week period. And remember, they were resistance training. The rigid dieting group, again, not significantly different, but lost a little more fat over the dieting period. Not significantly so, but it was more fat loss. The really intriguing part came during this post-diet phase. So after the 10 weeks of not doing anything, the group that was previously in the flexible dieting group actually gained a significant amount of lean body mass as compared to the rigid group.
So to repeat that, the rigid group lost a little bit more body fat, you say?
During the diet phase.
During the diet.
Yep. But then the flexible dieters gained a little bit more lean body mass after the dieting phase.
So comparing body composition, you think were they primed for more long-term success then?
That's our takeaway. Okay. Now, I'd like to be able to tell you, well, here's why they gained more muscle mass over the 10-week post-diet phase. But I don't have an answer because we looked at calories, they were the same. Protein intake was the same. The amount of time that they spent in the weight room and doing cardio was the same. So you'd like to point to one of them and say, oh, they did this and that's why. I don't. It bothers me as a scientist not to have a reason.
Critics of flexible dieting and if it fits your macros always say, oh, that's just the lazy way to do it. You're not they think you're not being strict. And really what it sounds like is it's almost like you're creating a lifestyle mentality of, okay, I know what my macros are, and as long as the food fits in what my macros are. And so to the critics, it's almost saying, here's some data showing that there might be more long-term benefits. We don't know why, but in kind of
and at least from our study, which is the only study we can draw from at this point. And I would say my own philosophy is I'd like flexible dieting, but it's not for everybody. Some people do much better with, tell me what to eat, give me a plan. And then that's what they should do.
Right. And it can also, depending on how it plays out in somebody's macros, not really be a health diet necessarily. Like, there's nothing in there telling you eat your vegetables.
No.
It's macros.
It is. Now, if you are taking this, let's say you're trying to get stage ready, the flexible food choices really start to get restricted on a flexible diet because there's not really room for cake when you're cutting a lot of calories.
Right.
You can still plan to have a little piece of cake, even getting ready for contest. But yes, it is flexible. But as calories keep getting cut and cut and cut, that flexibility isn't quite as flexible as what it is if you're not dieting.
It's almost like it self-selects. It's to the point where you become just like a rigid diet competitor when you're going into competition.
Yes, yeah.
So, as you can see, there's many different diets. This just highlights some of the most popular. And with all diets, there comes pros and cons, whether that be cutting out sweet things if you have a sweet tooth, or even having to pee on a stick. Everything comes with a pro and a con. You just have to find what fits best for you and what is most sustainable for your life. If you're trying to drop fat, build muscle, and just overall live a happier, confident life, the key is simply, how long can I sustain this diet for? If the answer is merely 1 to 6 weeks, that's not a solution. That's a quick fix. If the answer is, I see myself being able to do this for the foreseeable future, well, then you found the correct answer for you. So we hope you were able to make that decision, and we look forward to hearing your comments down below. As always, have an amazing week.